I'm Priscilla Barrera with the Investing News Network, and here with me today is Ken Brinsden, who is the CEO and Managing Director of Pilbara Minerals. Ken, thank you so much for being with us again.
Pleasure, Priscilla. Nice to be with you.
All right, so we are at the end of 2019, yes. To start, can you let our audience know if the lithium market performed as you expected at the end of last year, and if there were any surprises?
Look, I don't think it would come as any surprise to say we have been surprised, but in particular, the extent to which China and China domestic conditions for lithium raw materials have impacted the market. Broadly speaking, China is a key driver because they are the main consumer of lithium raw materials. And the change in the subsidy regime in China, combined with a relative weakness in the China economy, trade war, that type of thing, has clearly impacted lithium raw material demand. In turn, that it's impacted price in a way that we hadn't expected. But we haven't lost faith in the general direction of the market, the adoption of new energy vehicles and also the application of lithium-ion batteries in energy storage, and still very confident we're in the right sector.
All right, and it's been a challenging year. Investors seem to be on the sidelines. Do you expect this to continue in the lithium market as a whole in 2020, or will demand pick up a bit more next year?
Yeah, well, as I said, the key driver has been the domestic situation in China. But on the flip side, the rest of the world, ex-China, I would argue, is probably outperforming people's expectations. The problem is that's still only a relatively small subset of the market. Nonetheless, I still think that ultimately has an impact within China, because we can see a lot of sourcing going on now through the China lithium-ion supply chain, whether it's chemicals, cathode materials, or even now, I would argue, cell production and the export of cells. So yeah, we have some faith that the market is ripe for continued support over time. We just need to find, we'll find our way to weather through the current storm.
All right, and before we talk about Pilbara specifically, I wanted to ask you about Australia in general and the Australian lithium market. What do you think are some of the advantages and maybe challenges the country faces as we enter this 2020 decade where we will see most growth?
Yeah. No, that's a really good question, and I think the Australian sort of lithium raw material supply base is actually really well positioned for the future sort of evolution of the lithium-ion battery technologies, and in particular the adoption of the higher nickel cathode materials. Now, it's fair to say that in the China domestic market that hasn't quite panned out the way we'd expected, or the speed of adoption hasn't quite panned out the way we'd expected, but the rest of the world is absolutely heading down that path. High nickel cathode materials, higher energy density, longer range, and that's what people are going to be after in their electric vehicle. That's important because the spodumene source of supply is going to be very helpful in the manufacture of lithium hydroxide, which in turn makes its way into the high nickel cathode materials. So for all those reasons, I think the raw materials subset and the mineralisation in Australia, but in particular Western Australia, is very strong to support the adoption of the high nickel cathode materials.
All right, so now talking about your company, to start, I just wanted to get a sense on the recent news about this incident at the mine. Can you give us just a general comment on what's happening and what's next?
Yeah, well, it's a shocking incident, and we really feel for the families involved. I'm really pleased to say that our team has handled the situation, I think, with distinction, under very, very difficult circumstances. And now we hope that there's some resolution, some reconciliation over time. Certainly not the sort of thing that you expect to happen at a mine site, but as I said, I think our team's done as good a job as could be possible to find a way through a very difficult circumstance.
All right, and now speaking about the year for lithium companies, including Pilbara, it's been a tough season. I just wanted to ask you, what would be one of the lessons you learned during this challenging time?
Yeah, it's a challenging time in the market, and the implication is that you, perhaps even more so than was ever the case in the past, you have to be really careful and in establishing the right customer base. That's challenging, but I think it's something that Pilbara Minerals has worked very hard on, having also achieved some good results. And yeah, we've been able to attract big and important customers and strategic investors to the company because of the quality in the resource. And in these difficult times, you come to rely on them even more heavily, it could be argued. So yeah, I think that's a valuable lesson for us and something that we'll continue to carry forward with the quality customer base we have.
All right, and now looking ahead, where do we move from here? What is your strategy now going into 2020, and what makes you believe that Pilbara will survive this down season?
Yeah, well, we think we're as well placed as we can be. We've moderated production to ensure that we're not getting ahead of the key customer demand. And we think that's a completely rational response to the current market situation. What it allows us to do is to maintain the mine, to maintain our production, to continue to improve the plant's performance, with a view to coming out the other side as we fully expect demand to come back on. Why do we have some faith in that? Well, we know and can see that there is a lot of sourcing going on downstream in the lithium-ion supply chain. The construction and commissioning of big new or very large-scale battery-making facilities that ultimately require a lot more lithium raw material supply. So we can see those moves happening downstream. It's just a matter of time before that starts to influence the demand in the lithium raw materials.
All right, and my last question for you today, Ken, what makes you most excited about this sector looking into the next decade?
We have no doubt that we're in the right the right subset of natural resources being associated with the battery raw materials industry. The lithium-ion battery platform is clearly now the rechargeable battery of choice. The big players downstream, the car makers, the battery makers, are all now heavily invested in the adoption of that technology. And the implication is lithium raw material supply has to grow by orders of magnitude off today's base, maybe as much as 10, 15 times over the course of the next decade. So for all those reasons, with our big resource, the quality of the resource, quality of the products that we produce, we would say we're very well placed to enjoy that next wave of demand growth.
All right, thank you so much for being with us today.
Pleasure, Priscilla. Thank you. Nice to be with you.
Once again, I'm Priscilla Barrera with the Investing News Network, and here with me today is Ken Brinsden, CEO and Managing Director of Pilbara Minerals.